Jill tried not to question why God made Sammy bipolar, or why Joey sat in a world of his own, until something irritated him out of it. "Too loud!" Joey pressed his hands to his ears, ready to erupt. Jill could hear his teeth grinding in conjunction with Sammy's wails. She pressed Sammy's face to her breast and confined her arms. Sometimes it seemed the tighter she held her, the more quickly she calmed. She'd use a full takedown if it came to it, though she hated to, especially when it would go into the child's report. Had her father forgotten today's medication altogether? The call she had made to him was still unanswered, as usual. Please, Lord, comfort her. If Joey lost it as well, she'd have to call for help. She couldn't contain them both at once. She glanced at Pam, who looked over from her group under the window, ready if needed. Quickly assessing the situation as defusing, Jill nodded her assurance to Pam, who returned her focus to her own group. It was a judgment call, but she gave Sammy the benefit of the doubt. Frequently, they flew blind, taking each day each child in stride, short-staffed, underfunded, yet still required to provide free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment for kids whose functionality would never allow the success Jill wanted so much for them. But she ran the program the best she could. "Jesus loves you," she murmured too softly for Sammy to hear. Yet it seemed to help. The wails became sobs, which didn't violate Joey's receptors as deeply. He rocked himself, refusing eye contact, and pulled the skin between his thumb and forefinger. It would be raw again before he stopped, unless Jill could distract him. But Sammy first. If she could only control everything that might set them off. In a perfect environment, she could even teach them to read. As it was, she'd feel grateful to accomplish Sammy's goal of initiating and maintaining one healthy social contact, and to overcome Joey's lack of receptive language. Lord, you balance the whole universe. Help me to balance these needs. As Sammy calmed, Jill watched the erupting forces in Joey subside as well. She glanced at the other two students. Angelica was labeled SLIC, Significant Limited Intellectual Capacity. She had brain function that simply couldn't match her desire to learn. Her Type A personality wouldn't let her give up, and Jill longed for her success, especially when getting the brighter, more capable kids to even try was a challenge. Some days, Angelica was truly her saving grace. She was well named. And there was Chris. Jill suspected his condition was more likely sleep deprivation than low functionality. The domestic strife in his home was heard all down the block at all hours, and his blank, semi-comatose refusal to perform could be partly attributed to that. Even in the midst of Sammy's tantrum, he looked glazed. "All right, pay attention. I want to read you a story." Angelica's round brown eyes found her immediately. She loved stories and curled her legs up under the pink skirt that matched the many pink barrettes clipped into tiny, coarse black braids. Sammy's sobs became gulping breaths. Jill used a firm, soothing tone. "Do you want to hear the story, Joey?" He kept rocking, but still slightly, when she said, "It's about a rocket and a monkey." Sensing peace, Jill risked loosening her hold on Sammy. The girl was big for 8, a possible growth disorder in addition to her chemical imbalances. Sammy glared at Chris, who had expended the energy to set her off in the first place by making fun of her reading. Climbing down, Sammy deliberately kicked his knee. "Ow!" Chris kicked back, and Sammy charged him. As Jill moved to intervene, he pulled a fishing knife from his pocket. Jill lunged for the knife, gripped Chris's arm, and took him down. Chris, who hardly had energy to write his name, fought until she trapped and subdued the scrappy 9-year-old. Jill's heart pounded. This was not some inner-city school where kids knifed each other. This was small-town, middle-America farm country. Probably why it was a fishing knife and not a switchblade. Within moments, Pam had hold of Sammy, and they pulled the children apart, still kicking and hollering. "Too loud!" Joey pressed his hands to his ears. Jill couldn't worry about that now. She jerked the knife from Chris's hand. "Where did you get this?" "It's mine." "Not anymore." With the knife in one hand and the child in the other, Jill marched for the office. Presenting herself in this sort of situation to Principal Fogarty would not be pretty, but she had no choice. Her kids were rarely armed, but invariably volatile. It came with the territory, but somehow Ed Fogarty always saw it as her fault. Still, she had no choice. School policy left no ambiguity in this situation. As the stress drained, she realized Chris had grown soft in her grip. Why did he carry a knife? Protection? She frowned down at him. "Don't you know better than to bring a knife to school, Chris?" He had retreated into his stare. He'd be automatically suspended. She could possibly advocate against expulsion due to his independent educational program. Even so, she would probably not see him until next school year. Disappointment and failure threatened her resolve. But there was no way around things now. She just hoped Pam had kept Joey from harming himself. Pam was a good teacher, but the kids didn't always respond as well to her somewhat abrasive style. As they approached the office, Chris held back. Jill stopped and turned. "I'm sorry, Chris, you made a really bad choice. Not only did you bring something dangerous to school, you used it as a weapon." "He'll kick me out." Jill nodded. "Yes, for a while. You should have known that would happen." His eyelids drooped. "I'll have to stay home." Jill heard the anxiety behind his dull words. "Yes, you will, unless your parents make other arrangements." He didn't answer, but his eyelids flickered. "Is there a problem with staying home, Chris? Something I need to know?" She checked all year for signs of abuse, given him chances to talk, but he never did. Now he just stood there without so much as a headshake. She took his shoulder gently. "We have to go in." She opened the door and propelled him into the office. Mr. Fogarty responded to her with all the grace she expected, that of a bull on a tightrope. At least he blew it out with her, and by the time Chris's mother arrived from her job, he was diplomatic and presented a gracious front. The woman looked as dull as Chris, took Fogarty's explanation with hardly a word, then jerked Chris out by the arm. Jill sighed. The best she had managed was to keep things open for Chris next year. By the day's end, she had earned a caramel frappuccino. It wouldn't spoil her appetite for the evening, just replenish her drained energy. She normally eschewed caffeine, but Dan would come for her in a little more than an hour with some special plans he'd alluded to. Suggesting she dress up had been especially significant, since they spent more time together in sweats and running shoes. Tonight, she didn't want to look like something dragged through the drain. She was just to the makeup stage when the phone rang. "Hello?" "It's Dan, Jill. Do you mind meeting me at Marcelli's?" "Marcelli's?" She smiled to herself. And it wasn't even a meaningful occasion. "Running late?" She rubbed a smear of moisturizer into her neck. "We're on a call. I'm not sure how long it'll take. Could be serious." She heard radio noise over his phone. "Go ahead, Dan. I'll hold down the table till you get there." She could hardly get upset over his doing his job, keeping Beauview safe and honest. After an hour and a half of raspberry Italian sodas, the first thing she said to Dan when he arrived was, "I need the ladies' room." "I'm sorry, Jill." He'd obviously changed in a hurry. His tie was askew and one side of his collar bent up. It's all right.